Good afternoon. It is 1 p.m. on Monday, the 13th of March. Very warm welcome to you all and welcome to my Monday Magic. I'm Mary Gregory, leadership and executive coach, and I'd like to continue the theme that we started from last week's Monday Magic around women leadership, particularly as it was International Women's Day last Wednesday, and I'm kind of considering this as International Women's Day's month. Really. So each of my Monday Magics this month will be along the theme of women and women in leadership and gender diversity as a whole. Now, something that I picked out, last week I shared some research with you from McKinsey's latest research about women in the workplace and the reality that women are actually leaving really high-level jobs now because they aren't tolerating cultures where there isn't a sense of well-being, flexibility, and being recognised for the extra work they do in terms of making sure that people in the workplace are engaged and fully on board and allowed to fulfil their potential. Women are actually leaving for those reasons. But also the other reason they're leaving is because of the microaggressions and unconscious bias that they experience as women at work. And how these microaggressions show up is through being talked down to, being treated as too junior to be in that leadership position, being talked over, classic one that happens for many, many women when they're in meetings, is being talked over, or their ideas being ignored and then picked up by someone else in the room, and they're the ones that get the acknowledgement for the idea in the first place. So lots of things going on in a very, very subtle way. And I thought it was quite useful to explore that in a bit more depth. And I've actually been reading this book, The Authority Gap by Mary Ann Seigart, which is, when I started reading it, it was actually quite depressing to read, to be honest, because some of the research that she's got in here and some of the things that are so subtle that we don't actually notice that go on around us, that we can all be guilty of, let's face it, in terms of the biases we express between men and women, the differences between men and women, and how women get listened to far less than men do in the workplace and get rewarded for very different things to the things that men get rewarded for. It was really telling. So this is a really interesting read. I do recommend you have a look at it if you're really into understanding more about exclusivity and getting that gender balance in place. So some of the things that she talked about that relate to the microaggressions is the classic one around how a man can show up and appear really confident, overconfident in some respects, and assertive, and he gets regarded as being a really strong leader. Whereas for a woman, for her to show up in that way, to be very assertive and to be very confident, she gets referred to as bossy or a ball breaker. There's another word that gets used as well. So straight away, women are seen as less likable when they are confident and assertive and demonstrating high levels of competence. Another thing that goes on is that a man will often, male leaders are very good at setting the direction, being authoritative, being very clear, and that gets lots of explicit acknowledgement within the context of an organization. Whereas for women leaders tend to be much more collaborative in how they work and also show lots of compassion to the people they work with. Really, really important qualities in today's very complex world, and the challenges that we face in terms of dealing with those complexities and leading through that complex change. So important those qualities are. And collaboration really is the way forward in terms of managing those complexities and finding ways to overcome them. But those qualities don't get recognised in the workplace. Certainly they haven't done in the past. Let's hope in the future they get recognised more. But certainly they're far less recognised than those qualities of being really clear about your direction and being a real visionary. The third thing is that there are lots and lots of role models for men in the workplace, how to be a great leader. They've got loads of male role models, particularly at senior levels around most organizations. Whereas for women, there are very few role models. And this is particularly prevalent in the STEM community, so the science, technology, engineering and maths. Those areas, those work areas, those organizational areas particularly have a lack of really strong role models for women to emulate and observe as something they could become in their future. So this creates a real dilemma, because on the one hand, as a woman, do you want to step up? You know, when we think about that confidence one, do you want to step up and be really confident and be proud of what you're doing and share and advocate, and then get a negative label along that? Or do you then choose to stay quiet and not talk about what you're achieving and not demonstrate your confidence and competence? And actually, that's another thing as well, is that confidence and competence often get muddled up. So someone can speak really confidently, and actually they're not really talking or making that much sense. But because they're talking so confidently, they get labeled as competent, when actually they might be really incompetent. And yet someone who's quieter and might not be speaking up as much might have a much greater level of competence as well, which kind of makes me think that addresses the whole introvert extrovert piece as well. That often extroverts will speak out and they'll be seen as the people that are the leaders, but actually the people that aren't speaking out may have a great more depth and thought gone into what they might say eventually, and they are just as able to be leaders, in fact maybe even more potent leaders than those that are out there straight away and speaking out. So what am I saying here? What am I actually ruminating about today, and what am I reflecting on? I think it's really about the fact that women are in a double bind. If they don't speak up, they'll be labelled as unconfident, quiet, no leadership potential, and therefore get overlooked. And yet when they do speak up, they're considered bossy, unpleasant, a bit abrasive, very different to how a man might be recalled. And in that way, they also get overlooked for promotion because they haven't got the qualities of an inspirational leader. So there is a real double bind going on there, and we've got to think about how do we overcome this double bind. So I suppose for me, first of all, starting with myself as a woman and with other women that I might work with, it's about encouraging us as women to stick to our guns, to be authentic. You don't have to suddenly emulate and be like a man to be successful in the workplace. So find your authenticity, learn to dial it up and dial it down in different situations so that you do get seen for the person you are, but also access your strengths, recognize what your strengths are, play to those strengths. And the more you do that, the easier you'll find things will be. You'll probably find that it's less draining when you're playing to your strengths. When you're doing things that you're really good at, it's much less draining, and it also helps you to feel much more confident. So play to your strengths. But something that we can all do, men, women, whatever gender we are, whatever underrepresented group we are, something we can all do is accept that we are all biased. And we will all have assumptions that we're making about people. You think about when we first meet somebody, we make a judgment call on them within the first 5 seconds of meeting them. That is fueled by biases. So the other thing to think about is don't be ashamed of that. It's a human thing. It's a human dilemma, bias, and unconscious bias completely is impactful because we're not necessarily conscious of it. So my invitation to you is to start getting more conscious about it. Recognize when you're making an assumption about somebody, recognize about how that might be impacting the way you're behaving to them, and then correct yourself. Rather than judging, engage with curiosity, get to know somebody, find out more about them rather than immediately jumping to conclusions based on judgments that are often very unfounded because they're based on your unconscious biases. So I think that's really my message for today, is to just make sure as you go into the week, be conscious of the way you're judging people, be conscious of how your biases and assumptions might be impacting your interaction with them, and give everybody a chance. Because what I think is really important, I'm, I do a lot of work with women leaders, I do a lot of work with gender bias, but actually what I'm committed to is organizations where everybody is included and everybody has an equal chance. So we embrace equity for everyone from all underrepresented groups, not just from women, although obviously I'm talking about women today. So think about how that applies to everybody. And as you go through the week, enjoy your week, see what you learn from it. And I shall look forward to seeing you next Monday, where we'll look at another topic in relation to women leaders and some of the headwinds they may face and how to get over those. Do also look out for my posts about my Leadership Live, which is coming up on the 23rd of March, and that is all about women and ego. So we'll be looking at how ego impacts women, the sorts of traits that women tend to have in terms of their ego versus men, but also how to how to get over some of those as well. So do join me for that. We'd love to have you there. And for the meantime, have a great week, and I'll see you next week. Bye for now.